Eddie, are we ready?
Yes.
Enough room? All right. I wanted to slouch, so I just expect it. I will call the meeting to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Allen.
Present.
Councilmember Hagenow. Councilmember Kerr. Here. Councilmember Martin.
Present.
Councilmember Parmet.
Aye.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Here.
Mayor Riley.
Here.
There are 6 members present.
Thank you. Our town manager isn't here right now. He's at a doctor's appointment. He'll be in shortly. So with that, we'll go forward. Our first item is public comment period. Would anyone in the audience or anyone online like to speak to any topic that's on the work session agenda? Please step to the podium and state your name and where you live or work in Keystone, or you're connecting to Keystone.
Christy Camp from Ski Tip, and workforce housing is on the agenda. And I wanted to say quick congratulations to the new council member, Ron, for appointment. I would have voted for Ron. Ron shared a great idea about long-term rental. And I want to echo the incentives placed to promote long-term rental could have a major impact on community engagement, workforce housing, and preservation of natural environment. And then I wanted to add that incentives for residents and visitors, such as discounts and rebates, to participate in specific stewardship opportunities as the need of our natural environment is, the needs are finite, is economically advantageous to address and include community programs and community engagement opportunities such as Blue River Watershed Group's new dashboard for water quality. Also on the agenda is the SE Group's findings. I want to echo, congratulate the town for the efforts to involve community in the town's concerns and interests, and including the new survey out on tourism. I just want to encourage and add that if you continue to involve community, I believe you'll see these programs as they develop, engage the community with stewardship. And finally, on the skid steer, the Trails and Open Space Advisory Board, which is enthusiastic and robust, is just getting started. And in this enthusiasm, we have an interest in the capability of the towns operating as skid steer, and would grooming of wider trails be possible? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other, is there anyone online who would like to speak? No one to speak? No one else in the audience? In that case, I'll declare the public comment period closed and turn it over to our Community Development Director for discussion on the housing needs assessment.
Yeah, for the record, Lindsay Hirsch. I believe we last heard EPS speak to this issue of the housing needs assessment on September 9th. I believe that was the meeting date. And council absolutely interacted and raised some very good questions with regards to the housing needs assessment and how it was performed and how to look at it. And subsequently to that, I actually reached out to individual council members to garner and make sure that we've covered all the questions. And we actually, I put that out there at that September 9th meeting as well. And I did get some very good questions and responses that I forwarded on to Brian. And I believe tonight what we're going to do is follow up with those questions, and again, the overall philosophy of what we're trying to get at with regards to providing this mandated housing needs assessment. And again, part of what we're doing tonight will feed directly into the comp plan for developing some recommendations in the comp plan. So they are certainly connected. So with that, Brian with EPS is prepared a quick, relatively quick slideshow for you that hopefully addressed the questions that we heard at the last meeting.
Thank you. Thanks, Lindsay. Again, Brian Duffany with Economic and Planning Systems, based in Denver, consultant to the town, and working with Dylan and Gabby at SE Group as well. Maddie, would you mind maybe, I think there's a couple of little things you could click out of. Well, maybe it's a word that might block this. Yeah, it just kind of blocks the headers. There's a way to get rid of those. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so we went over this. We have math again, so I apologize. It's a little less math than last time. So we went over this last time. We based on some of the comments and questions that we received. The direction we received was to kind of take another look at this a different way. So I like to think of it sometimes in economics and in planning, you're kind of triangulating, looking at things a different way and trying to see what sticks. So that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing this evening. So we're gonna look at this in terms of trying to isolate and separate out the workforce housing demand that's sort of created by and addressed by Vail Resorts, and then try to figure out what the town might be interested in doing. So and then talking about some strategy recommendations. So we're mainly going to be talking about buy down programs and P3s. We're not, based on direction last time and further conversation comments, I don't think we're no longer recommending ADUs. It just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense in Keystone. And if people are interested in it, we have some supplemental analysis at the end that can show kind of how the wages align with incomes and the spectrum of housing need. So why don't we jump on into it? So the approach that we took was that, within the Keystone Resort PUD, Vail Resorts is sort of responsible for managing its housing impacts within that. And so what's the town's focus then? What's the housing demand created by jobs and workforce outside the PUD? And so we're trying to take a crack at that. And this is not a precise science. It's not accounting or engineering. The data is not perfect, but trying to look at order of magnitude. So what we did, and we'll show you the math, just big picture here. Look at how many total jobs are in Keystone. Subtract out the jobs that are in the Keystone PUD, and that gives you an estimate of what's left in the rest of Keystone. Okay.
One question. When you say jobs inside the PUD, are you talking about the Vail Resorts jobs or the
Yes.
total jobs?
The Vail Resorts jobs from that memo.
All right.
Yeah. So every year do they do that?
Yes, there's an annual report.
Yeah. Every year, Vail Resorts has to issue an estimate of what their job generation is and how much housing that generates need for and how much they're mitigating. That's based on that. So we take that leftover, the jobs in the rest of Keystone, we convert it to employees. We have an estimate of employees who might prefer to live in Keystone. And at the end, if we have time and are interested, we can show you how wages and income levels relate. I'm going to skip through some of this nerdy definition and caveat stuff. We can come back to it. Actually, let's talk about it. So there are a couple of challenges here. I just want to be completely transparent and upfront with what we did. So the Vail Resorts analysis, they look at it in terms of FTEs. There's the challenge is that employment data is not published in FTEs, full-time equivalents. You can try to convert one way and the other. You're just making more assumptions and more estimates. So we're going to use the jobs from the Vail Resorts, not the FTE conversion, that we can compare with published job estimates from the federal employment data sources. And just a clarification, this came up in one of the questions we received, responded to in that memo. Jobs data are place of work. So they're reported by where the employees are working. And so jobs in Keystone are filled by people who might live in Keystone, about 7% based on the data we have, and people who commute in, about 93%. And again, just that's the jobs are the most direct comparison. We also tried to look at it with seasonal jobs. I think there was some interest in trying to segregate out the seasonal employment. That comparison proved difficult and gave some counterintuitive figures. So we had to abandon that approach and just looked at it in terms of the annual number of jobs. More nerdy stuff that might add confusion, but is worth addressing, I think. Jobs data are head counts. This is kind of more the difference between jobs and FTEs. So jobs data are head counts. So when you look up how many jobs are in a place and how many jobs are in what industry from the employment data sources, you're getting a head count. So for example, and then I'm just going to read the slide. Jobs are held by employees who might hold more than one job. So let's say I work at the mountain in the winter and I work on the golf course in the summer. That probably shows up as 2 jobs in the employment data. If I'm a bartender at night and a ski instructor during the day, that also probably shows up at 2 jobs in the employment data for one person. On average, people who work in Summit County have about 1.6 jobs. That's data from the 2019 housing needs assessment that we did. I'll get to you in one second, where we did a very extensive survey of residents and employees to derive those numbers. Yes.
Can you clarify, when you're saying jobs here, you mean like job codes, jobs, or are you using FTEs?
I'm using jobs.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Yep. And, like seasonal employment is a tricky one. So when you look at the jobs data, right, there are these peaks, right, by month or by quarter. Those aren't always new people, right? It might be me. I ski bummed after college. I had a job on the mountain and I worked plowing driveways in the morning. So I had 2 jobs, right? But then I didn't have that second job in the summer, right? So you get these seasonal peaks, and some of those are seasonal workers that come in and leave. Some are not. It's, I would say, near impossible to separate that out. So there's a lot of complexity and nuance in this stuff. So we're looking at order of magnitude, trying to give us some indication. And I like where we landed. So here's the math. 2,300 jobs in all of Keystone. Take out about 1,100 in the PUD, about half. Gets you to about 1,200 in the rest of Keystone. So when we're talking about housing demand, it's good to account for this multiple job holder factor, so you're not overestimating. So 1,171 divided by 1.6 jobs per employee is 732 employees. So 732 bodies. Why don't I pause there? Tracking?
One quick question. When you gave the 90+% commuting to Keystone, what's your definition of commuting? Would someone living outside the town boundaries but in employee housing in what is generally regarded as Keystone but not within Keystone boundaries, is that commuting? Or is it only someone who's...
Excuse me. So that's not in here yet. I'll answer your question. So just in its purest sense, when you pull the commuting data, you say, give me the people that work in Keystone. Well, it's more like this, right? Give me the people that work in here, that data source. If they live outside there, they're commuting. So if they live in Summit Cove, which is outside of outside of outside of Keystone, they would be treated as a commuter, as an in-commuter.
That's good clarification. I think I'm asking about the very large number of beds that are not technically within the town boundary, but are, you know, like right over there.
Wintergreen, right? Like that stuff.
Wait, are you talking tenderfoot?
Yes, Tenderfoot in the boundary?
Yes.
Tenderfoot's in the boundary, but Wintergreen isn't?
Well,
Okay,
part
all
of
of part of Wintergreen isn't.
most of Wintergreen is not.
Yeah. I mean, this is where, this is where estimates like this in small areas are hard,
Okay.
right? There's a fair amount of fuzz in small area estimates like this. So I wouldn't try to, interpret this as exact science.
Just a simple question. The 1.6 that's for the Summit County, do you think we're representative of that? Or are we higher?
Might be higher, but we don't know.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I know I've seen some data for the upper Blue Basin around Breckenridge, and it's more like 1.9. So it could be, but that triggers a whole like policy discussion of like, do you want to plan for the conditions, the community you want, or do you want to just, recreate, you're sustaining, you're continuing existing conditions, right? If we just keep assuming 2 jobs per worker, right, you're kind of planning for that, the same future you have, I guess, right? So it's kind of it's a little bit of a policy choice. So we're using kind of countywide averages. Okay. So let's back up. We're gonna follow the trail here. 732 employees. Those are bodies who work in Keystone, irrespective of where they live. Okay, where do people want to?
Outside of Vail Resorts.
That's correct. That's correct. Yep. All right, where do people want to live? I'll walk you through it and then we'll show you the math. We can get out calculators and do it together if you want. All right. Going back again to the 2019 Housing Needs Assessment Survey that we did, that found that 12% of the respondents, people who work in Summit County, they said 12% want to live in the Snake River Basin. The vast majority of the respondents said that they would prefer to live in the 10-mile and lower Blue Basin. So that's Frisco, Dillon, Silverthorne. So if you take 732, multiply by 0.12, 12%, get 88 people. You would just say, okay, 88 housing units needed in Keystone, 1 per worker there.
Presumably that 12% for the whole area there would be a bias that 12% probably are people who work over on this side, right? So it wouldn't necessarily be fair to only take 12% and apply it to 732.
Now
Presumably that number would be a lot higher, right?
a couple caveats to that I'll get to. It might be. I mean, countywide that also, I think the other, like on one hand, on the other hand is always with this stuff. On one hand, you're also right. On the other hand, the Snake River Basin also includes places like Summit Cove. I had some friends that long-time locals up here. They lived in Summit Cove. It's really, pretty desirable locals area, right? So, do we know that 12% want to live in Keystone? We don't, but that's what we have. Let's start with that.
So what is the Snake River Basin? So I know it's
kind of
here, but it's also
like from outside of Dillon up to Montezuma,
is Montezuma as well.
Montezuma, Keystone.
Yes. Basically, isn't it Summit Cove, east, of the
I
valley?
don't think it includes Summit Cove.
Yeah.
I think that's in the.
For the drainage? The Snake River in the combine?
Yeah.
It does, yeah.
Okay, it does. All right.
Yeah, and, yeah, to the Dillon
Okay.
town limits,
So it would include Summerwood, for instance.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. But, again, take it with a grain of salt. Like, I would just, if you're just looking at the survey data, it says most people want to live Frisco, Dillon, Silverthorne. Fewer people said they want to live here. Now, when you ask this question in a survey, people are they're probably answering it based on what the conditions are on the ground today. They're thinking, well, and this is some of the feedback we heard in the comp plan, like that Keystone doesn't have a lot of other housing options besides affordable rentals, besides employee housing and, on one end, and then resort condos and large, expensive single-family homes. So they're thinking, well, what area has the community elements, shopping services, where are my friends, and the types of housing that I want, right? So let's just say, what if, so we take our 88 employees, round numbers, let's round it to 100. Say, well, what if we had better housing options here? What if we had more community elements to make Keystone more livable? Maybe we double it, 100 to 200 units. So here's the math. If you want to do math. So it's pretty easy math. 1171 divided by 1.6 is the 732. Take that, multiply it by 12%. 88 employee households. Round it to 100. Let's do a range of 100 to 200 units. Does it at least mathematically make sense, everybody?
Not really. I mean, I get your math, but you're taking 12% out of a countywide thing, and then you're applying it to a number of jobs that are located within this area. But the question was actually about a much larger area.
Well, the people that work in Keystone, only 7% of them, based on the data, only about 8% of them live here. So the other 93% live, throughout Summit County. So, again, it's not perfect, but if we assume those other 93% are, representative of that household survey, then, that 12% might hold up.
Aaron, those are good questions. I have a question right back at some point regarding this. Let's, for the time being, assume that 12% is indeed correct. And it may be right this moment, maybe not. It's in that neighborhood. From a philosophical standpoint, I guess, do we think that number should be higher or lower or the same? So just put that in the back of your head.
Yeah, we're just trying to figure out what does the town want to do? What does it make sense for you guys to put resources to? We're just trying to help you put some parameters around that. We had this slide last time with just one minor change to it now. So these are the other estimates of need that are out there. So countywide, the most recent housing needs assessment done for Summit Combined, estimating about 2,800 units countywide over the next 5 years. They allocated that to Keystone, probably based on the distribution of jobs. So that gives them about 265. It's nice to see that the work we did in 2019 is pretty consistent with that, 285, using a totally different approach. And then what we just showed you now is, segmenting it out, trying to isolate the rest of the town from the Vail Resort stuff. So 100 to 200 units. So then the question is, how does that compare to what we have, right? So I might cut to the chase and come back to this. So let's just look at the highlights. There's a lot of workforce housing here, right? There's like 1,265 beds of seasonal housing, 322 dwelling units. There's a distinction between a dorm and a dwelling unit we can get into if you want to. So yeah, like 322 dwelling units compared to 100 to 200 units of need in this thing, 265 to 285 in the other ones. So maybe you have enough to meet your local needs. I think that's one conclusion you could reach out of here. I think it.
You go back to that.
Absolutely.
When you look at that slide, and I look at the bottom half of it, the ownership and the rental side, it says we've had we have 91 ownership units in Keystone, and we have 231 rental units in the Keystone area, because I include all of Wintergreen when you
Yeah.
consider Keystone. So that's it. You came up, and I'll go back to Aaron's point. You came up with a number that said, 100 to 200 units were needed, but in fact, this says we already have 322 units.
That's what this says. Yeah.
So let me ask you a different question. Sure. Let's go back to that countywide housing needs assessment from which that 12% is derived. What's the total number of folks in that, of which 12% said they were interested in the Snake River Basin?
I don't know if I know the answer to that.
Reason I'm asking that question is when you pull up this bottom chart and you come to the conclusion that maybe we have enough housing, my mind just explodes, and here's why. Let's start with the fact that we've already excluded all the Vail resorts, right? But some of these are for Vail resorts folks. Also, every single one of those units, you don't have to live or work in Keystone. So people are getting the housing wherever they can, and they're working wherever they're working in the county. This isn't Keystone housing. This is housing that's in Keystone. It's not for people who work in Keystone. You're taking 12% of the non-Vail resort jobs and using that to generate how many housing units we might need in Keystone for people who work in Keystone. This is not that. This is apples and oranges. This is apples and rattlesnakes. How can you come to that conclusion from this? I don't think you can.
Yeah, it's hard. You're right. The people that live in the non-Vail resorts housing, we don't know where they work. We can't know where they work unless we go do a census and ask them. And that's how housing markets work. Like, you're right. People choose where to live based on this balance of like, it's a market, right? It's like this balance of like, where do they want to live? Where do they work? Where might their partner work? Can they find housing that they can afford, that they like where they want to live? Or do they need to just live where housing's available? So it's hard to isolate, these local needs like this
No, but let's
regionally.
go back and look on the ownership, every unit of, I can't speak to the other ownership, 9 other, but the 66 and the 16, we know exactly how many people in the Keystone PUD in those units. That's reported to us.
Right. It does say
On
that.
the Wintergreen LIHTC, we don't have a clue. You're also missing the existing LIHTC units that are out there as well, that are in the town. The 120 units of rental, we know, because they're reported by Vail Resorts, how many of those people, those units are occupied by Vail Resorts, are occupied by people who work in Keystone. And the Sunrise 2, that's long-term housing for Vail Resorts only employees. And we know that all of those employees have to work in Keystone. So we actually know how many, almost all of those, how many people are actually in Keystone, because we get that report annually.
And some of those should be excluded in the numbers that you said, well, those are in the Vail Resorts, as you refer to it, the PUD, Vail Resorts employees.
No, there's no requirement on any of those I just mentioned to be a Vail Resorts employee.
The Sunrise too?
Sunrise, the only thing, yeah, Sunrise 2 is the only one that's in that piece that's required for Vail Resorts employee. All the others, the way the PUD is written, they're required to post that opening in the first 20 days. The opportunity is there for anyone who works in the Snake River Basin. After 20 days, it can then be open to anyone who works in the county.
Mm-hmm.
So there's clearly a design preference laid out to allow people who want to live in Keystone to get on that waiting list and get units. The challenge is they're too expensive.
Um, you know, this is, you know, it's tricky policy area. I think the question, you know, the thing for you all to consider is, you know, what do you want to do more of, or what do you want to do less of? I think the interesting thing the mayor pointed out is, right, is look at your portfolio. So the real estate people call it. Let's look at our portfolio of affordable and workforce housing. A lot of rental, a lot of dorm style stuff, not a lot of ownership.
But the dorm style stuff is for seasonal employees. And they're for seasonal Vail Resorts employees,
Yes.
which you've excluded from that number. So really the top stuff there really doesn't apply a lot. What applies a lot is that bottom portion of ownership and rental. And that's where and like I say, we know how many, we can calculate based on the housing report, exactly how many people are in those units, all the units except for the light tech.
Will that stay the same going forward, though?
Yes.
It will?
It's apparently the light tech does not, for the preference for Snake River Basin absolutely will stay.
Yeah.
The light tech, legally, they can't put a preference. We wanted to.
Right, right.
And there's another 45 light tech that's missing.
But in the, you know, our 91 and our 231, you know, like West Hills, I think has a lot of Vail Resorts employees. They list them out in there.
Well, let's back again, that rental piece does not include the workforce housing portion of Wintergreen. That 120 units are open to anyone who works in the basin on a first come, first served basis.
Right. Because it's a federally funded.
It's a federally funded, well, not all of them are open to anyone who works, except for Light Tech, is open to anyone who works in the basin, first priority for the first 20 days of the vacancy.
Yeah.
And we know exactly how many in Wintergreen are Vail Resorts.
I guess I didn't take that extra step.
Yeah.
So I apologize for that. But I think,
How many would work in the PUD? I keep saying, that bottom piece
yeah,
really is not tied to Vail Resorts. Yes, there's Vail Resorts employees there.
yeah.
And just for the record, West Hills, the ownership component of what we're talking about tonight, it does work on the tiered approach. Was it the first 30 days or whatever, it has to be offered by someone working in the basin. So this a little bit more.
And Wintergreen does the same thing. Because that was PUD housing, and the reason, the rationale for that, by the way, was Wintergreen was put together, was dedicated to Keystone employees. And the community broadened that in working with the county to include anyone working in the basin. So that basically it opened it up largely, it opened it up to Arapahoe folks.
And I think
Anyone else in the PUD, anyone else in Keystone versus just the PUD.
I think that's a good thing.
Yes.
But I do think that when we're playing with this voodoo math and we're looking at the numbers inside Keystone and applying percentages to it to get the number of housing units that are needed for people in Keystone who don't work for Vail Resorts, but you expand it to hundreds of other workers who work in the basin. And you're looking at these units which offer housing if they happen to have that capability and need in that moment before it's opened up to everyone, which is good. but doesn't capture everyone, but it's open to the whole basin. You can't just take that number, add it up and say, oh, look, we're meeting our housing need for Keystone based on the number of jobs within Keystone times this percentage that we've just picked, not quite out of the ether, but not much better than that.
It was a pretty robust household survey.
I still think that you're applying the numbers in a way that no one outside of
Fair.
your particular business would ever hang their hat on that, coming from the healthcare world.
Yeah, and my concern, and I echo Aaron's concern. My concerns, I think your numbers understated it because people who, there's going to be a much higher percentage of people who are working in Keystone who are going to want to say, yeah, I'd like to live in Keystone. A majority of the jobs in Summit are Upper Blue, Lower Blue, Frisco, Dillon. Those people would, and that's where a majority of those jobs are. So it's,
People, yeah, I mean, people,
percentage is going to be higher. The question is, at the end of the day, does the exact number matter when you look at that we have we have a lot of housing.
Yeah.
I just don't think that housing, when you look at the demographics you've laid out earlier, matches the demographics of the people who are filling that support jobs.
I also don't think the number matters that much. I think it's more, what do you all want to do? What priorities do you all have?
That's what I'm trying to get out of this. And I apologize.
It's okay.
Also, at the end of the day, this report will have to be accepted by the state. So in the, I want to hear what you want. So SE Group can build those recommendations into the comp plan. But with that being said, this report needs to be accepted by the state.
And I'll
So
repeat.
it's tough for you.
So basically, this report says we don't need any new housing.
We can,
It could be interpreted that way as
Yeah.
written.
Yeah, that's.
Well, that's what I'm trying to understand.
the way we did it last time, you needed more. You know, we're revising the methodology. Listen, I'll say this again. The state requires housing needs assessment. The housing needs assessment has to have an estimate of need. That estimate of need does not bind you legally, financially, in any way to anything. They need an estimate of need. And looking further into it, this is a local housing needs assessment, not a regional housing needs assessment. Local housing needs assessment do not need to produce their own estimate of need. We can reference the estimate of need from the regional housing needs assessment, which you will probably be asked to review when that comes out. I think they're working on revising that. So you're going to be in the same position of questioning the regional housing needs assessment estimate of need. I wouldn't put too much importance on it. Dolan needs if you want your Prop 123 funding qualifications, if it's, just if you can get to something reasonable that doesn't make you ill, roll with it. I think
What it sounds like is this is a report that's going to go to the state. We're going to be applying for 123 money to, at the minimum, develop this area, I suspect. If we were to have a HNA that said we currently have all the housing we need, even though it might not meet the income demographics, would that impact priorities that the state would put on giving us grants?
Sorry, I'm a lot I'm processing. Can you repeat that question?
All right. If this report said, and I agree, at first glance it said we have plenty of housing.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I think later on you're going to say we need some lower incomes.
Yeah.
But we have plenty of houses. And we're going to be going to the state with looking for grant money for building probably this area.
Right, right.
Portion of this area. And the fact that we have our own report that says we have plenty of housing.
Is that going to
It's
affect
at a
that?
disadvantage for getting grant funding for future housing.
I'm not sure because you're still part of you're still part of you still may be part of the regional housing assessment. That's a question for Department of Local Affairs. This stuff is so new. They're still trying to figure out how to implement it. Yeah.
Another basic question. Ken was talking, Mr. Mayor was talking about, we're going to get into the economic dynamics. That's another angle against this. I guess what I'm trying, I understand all the logic you walked us through, and I understand every single one you could argue, and it could distort the numbers, but assuming that we run with it, and right now, housing meets the needs, but that's in the general. Now, is this taken to the next step? Are we heavy in lower income? Are we versus we're missing the middle? I mean, where?
Yes, yes. All of that.
Clear.
All of that. Yeah.
So is it fair to say if this housing needs assessment will inform the comprehensive plan, then it is up to us to decide, are we satisfied with a lot of seasonal and low income housing, or do we want to change the economic climate and the attractiveness by building the missing middle?
I think that's a great transition to this slide.
I'm not trying to get you off the hook.
Well, that's what I was.
Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, and it's hard, it's really hard to isolate these hyper local needs from the regional needs.
Sure.
Right? They wouldn't have built Wintergreen if they didn't think they could capture demand from the rest of Summit County, because that's how housing markets work. So in the comprehensive plan engagement, they had an in-person engagement. They had an in-person engagement session, and some of the feedback was pretty much what you just said. Like, Keystone doesn't have enough other types of housing. It's affordable rentals, it's employee housing. I know that's in the Vail Resorts PUD, but that's that people they're not thinking at that level. They're just thinking of what's out there and what's available. So would Keystone be a more attractive place to live and more, a fuller community with more housing options? That just is not enough of a town feel. You get what I'm saying. So
One thing that, again, you prefaced by saying the seasonal numbers are tough numbers to come up with and justify. We know what the numbers are that Vail Resorts has, but there's a whole bunch of other jobs here that are outside of the Vail Resorts purview that are also seasonal. And we don't have a good feel for what that is.
yeah,
I'm sensing. And that's something that concerns me. And it's an imbalance that currently exists in the Vail Resorts housing.
yeah.
And I was hoping we were going to be able to get some sense of, do we have a need for other seasonal or don't we?
Yeah,
And maybe it's that seasonal was handled by people getting together and rooming in Wintergreen or somewhere else.
Yeah, I have some rough numbers on what the difference between the peak quarters and low quarters are. The hard part, they don't align well with what Vail Resorts is saying on their seasonal need. So they're hard to compare.
And my guess is that almost all the Vail Resort seasonal never included in census numbers.
It may not be. That's the other issue.
That's the challenge we have. You look at when those numbers are captured and how because they don't have mailing addresses, they don't have street addresses. So as a result, capturing those people and getting them in the surveys is very, very difficult.
J1 visas are not in these numbers either. They might be in the Vail Resorts numbers they report, but they're not in the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
They are in the Vail Resorts numbers.
So there's more apples and pears
And that's,
rattlesnakes. Yeah.
I'm not giving you solutions, I'm just
Yeah.
giving you observations
Yeah.
and the challenges we have. All right.
Yeah. So, I think, the strategies are really around housing diversity. And we talked through some of this last time. Realistically, there's a limited number of tools that I think Keystone has. So let's just be realistic and honest. But housing diversity strategies is a fancy way for saying that you're just trying to broaden the types of housing units that exist and are available. Trying to think beyond employee housing and apartments, creating more homeownership opportunities. A quote that stuck with me in a meeting I was at in Crested Butte a couple months ago was, they were arguing about design standards or something arcane like that. And someone said, people create neighborhood character, not the buildings. It's people that are here year round that keep the lights on that create neighborhood character. Let's talk about that. That just really stuck with me. And so I think the best options for you all to think about are really doubling down on some type of deed restriction incentive program. There aren't a lot of new housing development opportunities, maybe outside of what you might be able to do with potential town-owned property. So I've got some detail on those. Any thoughts, reactions, questions before I move on?
I thought it was helpful what you put in your report.
Good, thank you. There's a whole toolkit of affordable housing strategies, with different land use regulations and supply-oriented tools like like inclusionary housing ordinances, affordable housing impact fees, but all of those tools rely on new development to create units. And we just don't have that context here. So, and a lot of mountain towns are finding themselves in that situation too, as they're getting built out. There's only so much land. And so they're having to move to these, they're having to move to other types of programs that are locally funded, not leveraging development. So there's kind of two types of what we call buy down programs. One of them, the first, buying an entire building, usually apartments. You see that more in urban areas. They buy an older kind of apartment that's in bad condition. They renovate it and deed restrict it as affordable housing. I think it's a little less common in the mountains, but that's an option. Buying an entire building, deed restricting it. And the other ones are what we call deed restriction incentive programs. It's just a lot of words. Programs like Housing Helps, Good Deeds, Vail Indeed. Those are kind of the models. There's a lot of great examples out there. Like Frisco's program is really good. So they pay 15 to 25% of market value for a deed restriction on the home. So the price capped ones are usually, there's kind of two categories of price cap deed restriction. They might pay 15 to 25%. A deed restriction with no price cap might pay 5 to 15% of market value. They usually don't have an income limit on them. They're usually just restricted to people who work and live, are full-time residents and work and live within a defined area. For example, the town of Basalt is thinking about this, and they would limit it to what they call their 3-mile planning area. I think most of the other programs here are kind of Summit County. You have to live and work in Summit County to be eligible. So they have a lot of benefits. Number one, it's always cheaper to preserve existing affordable housing than it is to develop it new. It's really expensive to build. So it's kind of a, yeah.
You said Frisco, and I know Dylan and there are a lot of people that have these price cap deed restrictions that are funded by the towns. What are their restrictions about geography? Can those people live here, work here?
I think so. I didn't do go ahead, Lindsay.
Most of the municipalities work off the tiered approach. First 30 days offered to people living in the town or basin, and then it loosens up after that.
Okay.
Yeah, so at a minimum, it's someone who lives and works in Summit County. You could consider more restrictive ones, but that might make it narrows the market. It might make the home less appealing for someone to buy. And so they have a number of benefits for the people that take advantage of these programs, that sell the deed restriction. Might be someone that's maybe struggling to stay in their home, maybe getting priced out, might be, they might have a major repair they need. Maybe they have some delinquencies in taxes or mortgage, things like that. Or they just need some cash, and so it's a good tool for them to stay in their house. And then you've preserved a home permanently that's limited to the local workforce. It's a very incremental long game. You're not building 300 units in a chunk. It's retail level. It takes work, but it's effective.
How do they handle like maintenance? You're gonna go replace the roof.
Whoever lives in the home is responsible for that.
So even though they're gonna get an appreciation of 3%, they may not want to do that roof if they're gonna.
If they're living in the house, yeah, it's going to limit their resale value further if
Well, I know these are the challenges. It's pros and cons with this kind of stuff.
yeah.
And I just got an earful from a medical professional about this. It's in the deed, and they start rattling off all the negatives. And I go, wait a second, could you have ever even had that house? And the answer was no. So
That's the trade-off.
pros and cons.
Yeah. The idea is that when you're limiting it, you're taking it out of the second home market. So you're limiting resale to people who live and work in the area. So you're excluding the second home market. And the idea is that will naturally compress the resale price. There are some examples, we're getting into the weeds, but there are some examples where some of those resales have gotten pretty high. So,
Sorry to ask you.
Yeah, this is a good question.
Start something. You kind of poo-pooed the first one about buying the entire unit because we don't have an awful lot of those, maybe one or two.
Yeah.
But the second piece, so we'd be acquiring a home, the town would.
Nope.
So explain what,
I live in,
You pay them to deed restrict their house.
that's all we're doing.
But we create a program and it's up to the homeowner to apply for it.
exactly.
Right, got it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So your only out-of-pocket cost is buying the deed restriction. Whoever lives in the house is responsible for continuing to pay their mortgage, their utilities, all the maintenance. Okay. Yeah. So you think about it in terms of leverage. Here, let's look at some math. Let's take so the median condo or townhome price in Keystone is $825,000. Let's say we're looking for lower cost stuff. We're painting a picture with numbers here. Okay. So let's say we're targeting homes that are 25% lower than that median price, $620,000. So our cost, if we're going to buy a price capped deed restriction, let's say we can buy it, we're going to pay 20% of market value. So it costs us $123,000 to buy that deed restriction. And we've preserved, what's that? That's like a 4 or 5 to 1 leverage ratio, right? We've spent $123,000. It's preserved a house that's worth over $600,000 as deed restricted. Right. So, you've got $1 million a year roughly in sales tax from the 4A, B, 5A.
5A.
Thank you. Right. Your distributions from that. So, you could fund 8 to 16 of those acquisitions a year. Over time, that's going to add up.
One of the comments that I was thinking about when I was listening online, and I apologize for being late today, but I think is important nonetheless because it's foundational, is that when we were talking about the data and this iteration was less than the first iteration, there's political capital here, right? Like we are going to be making decisions about housing stock and the cost of that housing stock with money that is not necessarily ours, but is the town's. And it's important to have the right data for that so we know what we can invest in that. Because the last thing I think any of us wants is that we invest a significant portion of money into something, and then somebody does an open records request, which they're entitled to, right? And we're not trying to hide anything, but they get a report that shows we don't need housing. And so why are we spending money on this, or why are we investing time on this when, I mean, I truthfully believe we need housing. And I think that this guise of affordable housing in Wintergreen is an oxymoron. But I think that like we can talk about all these strategies, and I think it's really great to talk about these strategies, but it's still concerning to me that we don't have data that everyone here feels confident in. And you know, I know that there's a lot of things about small mountain communities that adjust that and cause issues with that. And I understand the complexities of it, but it's still like it's foundational. If the data that we're making decisions off of isn't believed by everyone, I have a hard time making a decision either way on that. And that's kind of the challenge I'm personally facing on this one.
Maybe go back to this slide. You know, housing the market. It's hard to isolate it to local areas. So, you know, the region needs 2,800 units. You know, how that shakes out, where it gets built is kind of, I think that the housing planners would say that's kind of every community needs to kind of work together and try to partner and do their part. So I don't think we're saying you don't need housing. I mean, it's clearly a regional problem here. It's really just a policy decision on what the town thinks their role is, and what resources you have to put to it. All right, any more questions on? Sorry, there's lag and.
Well, one of what you didn't talk about, I know it isn't necessarily a popular approach from a long-term perspective, is the program that the county had a number of years ago that was some of our non-Vail resorts businesses really liked. And it was the annual, if someone would put their unit into a rental program for employees, then there was an incentive that was provided to
At least the locals.
at least to locals.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that will apply to Keystone or not, but I know that there were significant number of businesses, at least one in particular, that use that extensively for their employees to be able to house them.
Sure.
And it may be, but it's an expensive program.
Yes, it is.
It's not a permanent solution.
Not a permanent solution. You may not, with the number of seasonals that we have, the seasonals aren't going to be out buying, and the seasonals have a challenge in renting, particularly in the housing stock that we currently have. I mean, you're talking multiple seasonal going in.
We're happy to look a little more into that if it's something you want to
Just
consider.
laying out that option, I don't know if we want to use it. Laying out that option may be helpful, and just clearly the advantages and disadvantages.
Well, and to the mayor's point, right, laying out that as an option, when we go to look at them, we can look at that. This lease to locals program will cost us $1 million. And these are not solid numbers. These are just made up numbers, right? It will cost us $1 million and will impact 100 people over 1 year, right? Versus we spend $1 million on 10 deed restrictions, and this is in perpetuity and impacts 10 houses that could house 50 people a year. And
it also goes back to the income levels that you're supporting as well. Because in many cases, when the businesses participated in that program and leased a particular unit, they were subsidizing that for their employees.
Yeah. So
as well, so.
What the business was subsidizing?
Absolutely.
Or the county was subsidizing?
Subsidies. The county was the initial subsidy, and then the businesses bought the
would kick
units
in.
and placed employees in those units.
But I think it was the burden on the employers that helped make that program go away at the county level.
No, it was, the employers wanted it.
Yeah.
They didn't want to manage it.
So I had participated in that
Oh,
program,
you're familiar with it.
and when the county stopped doing it, we asked them why, and they said because it was used so much. So basically it becoming cost prohibitive because it was so popular.
And so one of the things that they considered doing is changing it to a business-based. And that's the part where they couldn't get employers who were willing to run a business and a housing management. And they backed off on that idea.
That's one of the difficult things about Vail's seasonal thing is they have to employ an entire staff and they have to deal with that. And they unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but they just have a competitive advantage that they had these properties oftentimes, or they were acquired with the resorts, and the ma and pa shop doesn't have that same competitive advantage, which is that our position to insert ourselves into that balance.
Yeah, and it makes it very difficult for those businesses to hire.
Exactly.
I want to make sure we give enough time for Dylan's presentation. I'm about done. I mean, the other, just want to emphasize that P3s are essential in developing affordable housing. And if, you may have an opportunity here with some land, with the land around town hall that you may acquire. Affordable housing basically needs free land to be feasible. And even then it's not feasible because construction costs are so high. There's just a gap between what people can pay and what it costs to build. So, when that time comes, there's a lot of guidance out there on how to structure a P3. You may want to do some a little bit of an initial due diligence planning with your property to see kind of what'll, there's this balance of like what will fit physically and what works contextually, based on what's next to it or what's not next to it, and where's the market. So,
Is it safe to assume that, or is it safe that my understanding is Wintergreen's a P3?
I don't know who owned the land there.
Vail Resorts owns the land.
Yeah.
Vail Resorts long-term leases the land to Gorman.
Yeah.
We don't know what the terms of that are. Assume it's the equivalent of a P3.
Okay. P3 has been brought up at about every single conference I've been to in the past year and a half, right? And I like, what are some successful examples of this? Because if it's Gorman, I would argue it's not a successful example.
I mean, there's
Part of it was the counties got their pocket picked with Gorman. We were the first.
Oh, man.
Wintergreen was the first.
There are a lot. I'll just see if I can name a couple. I mean, what's success? But let's just.
And I'm
Projects I know of are the project that Frisco did with CDOT. Granite Street condos is one. I think the town kicked in the land. Breckenridge has probably done a whole bunch. They started buying land 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, in Breckenridge, and I think their last project there, if you look at first they own the land, and then in addition to that, they're throwing in about $500,000 a unit to build the units, to then be sold as deed restricted units.
Yeah. What about Smith Ranch? Who owned the land there? I don't.
Is that Silverthorne?
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Vail just did one. The residences at Main Vail, the town owned the land. They hired a fee developer to do the project. I mean, they're basically paying. Vail's basically funding the project. They're just hiring a developer to take it through entitlements, manage construction risk, and they get a fee out of that. Ways to do it.
One of the reasons Wintergreen's where it's at is, the land was provided by Vail Resorts through the long-term lease because they couldn't use it for anything else, and they get credit for it. And then but the county wasn't willing to put any significant additional dollars in to the build. So as a result, it drove it into, well, they wanted to get it down into the 80 to the 100% AMI. With the construction cost and the negotiation with Gorman, it got it into the 120% AMI cap. And then, of course, a few things got added to it that weren't covered by the contract.
And that's to your point about what do we define as successful? I think that everyone here would have a different definition of successful, but for me, it's not building the building. That's not success. That's a portion of it, but is it actually fulfilling a need?
There's like, not to defend Gorman or anything like that. We talk to a lot of people in affordable housing. There are some issues around the mountain towns right now where affordable housing is not affordable because the AMI definitions are out of whack with the actual household incomes. And so that is a whole rabbit hole we don't have time for right now. It's because the AMI definitions are based on inflation and what happened to inflation in the last 5 years.
Well, also, if you look at I forget if it's your report or Dylan's report mentions the AMI for our census designated areas like 53,000 or something. I don't know, it's a rough number, but the AMI that is used for Gorman calculation is nearly double that. So
I think we all agree on that last point you made, and might be prudent for us to try and avoid that term affordable housing when we really mean workforce or deed restricted housing. Attainable.
Yeah.
Attainable is far less loaded than affordable.
Well, I think we already did questions and discussions. Should I stop? Hand it over to Dylan? You want to see one more chart?
Anyone have any other questions? One, I think what you've done so far is very good. I think it's not perfect. It's not perfect. I don't think any of us believe there's a good solid foundation of data because anyway, but starting point, and we may have enough to deal with an interpretation. I don't know. I'd like to have more firm, but I don't know a way to get it.
I appreciate understanding how this is made because, to be honest and rather blunt, if this is checking the box for the state, cool, awesome. But as long as we understand that some of the core data might be flawed, that's important for us to understand when we make decisions. Because if we're coming at this like it's the gospel, right? Like that's just not true.
Not even.
And I'm not saying you were, but I just think that it's important for us to understand this process, and I appreciate you dealing with all of our questions.
You're welcome.
One of the other things we're going to have to deal with, and you've addressed it from this is really a policy issue, is I think there's a couple of issues the town faces. When you look at the numbers, maybe we have enough, but we're also trying to build community. And if we're trying to build community, that's going to demand perhaps different choices, particularly around this building, and may require totally different approaches to address this AMI problem, recognizing that wintergreen doesn't address the AMI problem.
Yeah.
Only LIHTC does somewhat.
I agree.
Yeah, that's fair.
This gives us a starting point.
Yeah, and not just comment. I mean, when you went through and walking us through, I mean, you could have argued each point, right? And to get to that detail, I think would be 2 years from now. And that's the challenge I think we're going to have. We're going to have to extrapolate or use our judgment. But I think you've done a great job of setting the stage.
Yeah, I think.
We all know it's wrong, but is it close enough for policy?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great way to say it. Yeah. Triangulate somewhere in here.
Again, thank you. I think we're, given the time.
I'm very happy, and I think if we read the tea leaves, that'll actually help us get to some recommendations for the housing element of the comp plan that ultimately you will be looking at and agreeing or not. And by the way, I have absolutely no expectation that when we get 7-0 consensus, it's not going to happen. But and tonight was wonderful, by the way, of giving that guidance, and you kind of showed some of the hands of what you were thinking. So thank you.
Thank you.
What is your summary of the tea leaves, Lindsay?
You'll read about it when you see the draft. No, honestly, with very few exceptions, give you the biggest, best toolbox we possibly can. And you can pick and choose as projects come to you. That's honestly my opinion. And go for the long game.
I would add one thing, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think that being able to target specific AMIs in the workforce versus like the $1 million question, but being able to target those in different avenues and approaches is also, I think, important.
And complicated.
Yeah, which is part of that big toolbox.
And always moving.
Yep.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Brian, thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'll be right here.
You've done a good job, and extremely imprecise.
Yeah,
Did you do that?
don't leave. You're my ride home.
By the way, for the purpose that we're using, because we didn't exist.
Yeah.
Again.
I was fortunate enough to listen to this conversation. It reminded me, so my undergrad is in economics, and I used to have a professor that would say, all models are wrong, some are useful. And, you know, I think a luxury that Brian and I have had through our careers working in planning is that we've had the time to accept the challenges of socioeconomic data and how it doesn't necessarily conform to the same reliability you might deal with in engineering or healthcare. But not everybody is used to dealing with socioeconomic data, and it's tricky and it has its frustrations, but I appreciate the conversation you all had with Brian. So I'm here not to talk about economics, to talk about the engagement report. So the last time we were here, we presented the findings from the in-person engagement and online survey engagement. And the main takeaway that I heard was to try and parse out the engagement that we collected from whether or not those respondents were for full-time residents, part-time residents, and or they work in Keystone and do not necessarily live in Keystone. So in your summary packet, I'm going to pause and just say that for the purposes of the rest of this conversation, it'll be really helpful to have an understanding of who all got to read or at least skim the engagement report as it's updated. Okay, great. So I want to just review the reformatting.
Yeah.
We'll talk a little bit about what we learned from separating out the responses by part-time versus full-time, and then talk about what's next. So what's changed? You don't need to be able to read this here. This is good. So yeah, this is just illustrative of saying where we went from. So from having all of the survey responses by just aggregated by all of the different responses, and then pulled it out to separating it from, do they live here full-time, live here part-time, or do they not live in Keystone but work here? So what did we learn? So actually, let me pause. Did this feel like separating it out in this format met what you all were looking for?
It meant what I would.
This is me, another level of analysis, which we wanted.
Yeah.
Okay. So what did we learn? I think broad strokes, there was a few interesting takeaways. At a high level, there was a lot of feedback that really didn't have a whole lot of statistical significance in between whether or not residents were full-time, part-time, or they did not live in Keystone but work in Keystone. But that being said, there were some interesting takeaways that we could look at based on the concerns and the interests from people that were full-time, part-time, and don't live but work. So we'll go through that really quickly. So from full-time residents, they tended to be more acutely aware of some of the infrastructure issues. So traffic on Highway 6, lack of sidewalks and walkability. I think that makes total sense, right? These are people that are here day to day and see the struggles of infrastructure and have more significant concerns. It's more salient for them. They have stronger concerns about a sense of community, over tourism and crowding, especially on winter weekends, lack of housing options for full-time residents, and relationship with their resorts, the feeling that the town is controlled by the resort. In short-term rentals, there's more of a sense that they're destroying neighborhood character or that they have some negative consequences, and that's from full-time residents. They tended to want more things like grocery stores, mail services, and year-round businesses and local amenities. And in terms of preservation, they were more interested in small town feel and not becoming more like, you know, the touristy feel that you get in Breckenridge, and more emphasis on natural environment. So I'll pause here. Was there any, and does that sound right? Does that resonate with folks?
If nothing else, it does sound right. It puts some specifics against the phrase we hear all the time. We don't want to be Breckenridge. And this is what they mean, I think.
Real quick, was the PowerPoint sent out or was it just a?
No, sorry, the PowerPoint was not sent. It was just.
I was looking through the report and I was like, is that?
I couldn't find it.
I was doing too.
Sorry, I've been traveling for the last 3 weeks and I didn't have time to put the presentation together until after the report was already sent out.
One quick note that I might ask for, if you could go back to the one where it was breaking down the part-time, full-time, I work here. So on the far right-hand side, if we could do a running total, that would personally help me as I look at some of these responses being like, okay, well, I have 3 people that live here full-time and 55 people that are part-time. Like I would probably take that consideration a little differently rather than having to sum up each one of those lines. Does that make sense?
So,
I'm a visual person. So if we have a total line here, that way when I'm looking, I can see that a majority of them are full-time versus a majority of them are part-time.
Sure.
And then that would help me weigh the responses a little bit better.
sure, that's fine. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, that's pretty easy to do.
And you're going to send this out now?
The presentation?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot more detail in the engagement report, which is a part of your.
There's a
packet.
lot of detail, and
Yeah.
sometimes a summary is helpful.
Okay. Yeah, I'll send the slides to Lindsay after this.
Thank you.
And he'll make sure to share them. Sorry, I lost my rhythm. Where was I?
You were talking about Breckenridge and Carol mentioned how it gives some detail to the statement that we hear a lot.
So did any other reflections on this in terms of, does this feel like it resonates more with full-time residents?
I mean, you can only be so certain about things, but it kind of, your data is kind of reinforcing what I think a lot of people suspected might be found with what you put on this slide when you parsed it out this way. So not shocked, I guess this is good and that what the feeling we've kind of been able to get from our constituents who are full-time, what we suspected is borne out by this drill down.
That's good.
Yeah.
We hear it anecdotally, and now we see it.
Yeah, and I was frankly surprised at the overlap and congruence
That's what I want to hear.
between the full-time and the part-time or the second homeowners. There was more congruence.
That's next, right? Okay.
So in terms of what stood out more from part-time residents, they tended to be more supportive of tourism and short-term rentals, in part because there was a lot of part-time residents that indicated that they're reliant on the short-term rental income that they get in order to be able to keep and maintain their property. More supportive of the tourism in the sense that the way that showed up in comments were things like it created a sense of vibrancy, or it created a sense of demand, or it created a sense of activity. We're less concerned about the daily infrastructure challenges, though there were still plenty of people that were part-time residents that indicated that they'd like to see more walkability and bikeability. The things that they focused on for their wants for improvements were better village activation, more restaurants and activities, and improved transportation between villages. They tended to be more accepting of the seasonal nature of town. And I think that we all can kind of understand that, if you're part-time and you're only here during the best seasons, you can appreciate seasonality a lot more than maybe folks that get to experience all of the seasons. Their preservation priorities tended to be more about the family-friendly atmosphere, natural beauty, and the low-key vibe. So I think what was interesting to me, and I think to the mayor's point, is when I was looking at the feedback as it was parsed out by full-time, part-time residents in terms of the survey questions, it was interesting seeing how there was a little bit of congruence between the different groups. And I think to me, what was really interesting is in the open-ended response questions is where you start to kind of see some of that nuance in terms of, let's say development, like part-time residents might be more in favor of development because they might be more interested in seeing more commercial activities, whereas full-time residents might be in favor of some types of development if it gives them more needed full-time amenities that create more sense of community. And so trying to pull out some of those nuances in terms of like what it is people are caring about is, it drills down. And I think that's maybe one area when you're looking at the report. The last, I think, 4 questions are all open-ended responses. And so all of the raw data is in there in terms of the feedback people provided by whether they were full-time resident or part-time resident. And I think that's really where you can pick up on some of those nuances. And then for the folks that work here but don't live here, they're fairly focused on and their responses were focused on practical needs. So availability of housing types, better transportation connections, and availability of parking, right? So if you have to drive in or you have to commute in some way and wanting to make sure that it's reliable and easy. Concerned about commuting challenges, the dangerous sense of Highway 6 and the intersections. They want more services that support workers and a better, safer infrastructure. They're less emotionally attached to character issues, right? They don't necessarily have the full picture of living here as well.
Do you think it's safe to assume, not assume, but from some of the summary up here, is it's almost indicating that people that didn't live here would want to live here?
I feel like I'd be speculating by answering that question, to be totally honest with you.
This was the smallest respondent group, right?
Yeah.
There was barely any.
Then what I actually say that the very smallest response in the very back end of the survey we did get some responses from people that had no relationship to Keystone and did not answer all of the questions, but I've filtered all of their responses out, so you're not seeing any of that.
Of these 3.
I don't know why.
No, you're good. So could you dive into the availability of housing then and what that would mean then if it's not, I want to live in Keystone, but I can't find housing?
Yeah, and I can actually tell you also anecdotally, I had some conversations when Lindsay and I were at Bluegrass and Beers. I had talked to a number of people that worked in Keystone and didn't live there. And what they were telling me is that we just need more housing in Summit County. And I think this kind of builds on a point that Brian was getting at, which is that, and I'll also back up and first I'll personalize this and then I'll get back into the engagement report. 10 years ago, I lived in Summit County. When I was looking for housing, I did not care what community the house was in.
Yeah.
What I cared about was, is it in Summit County in a reasonable distance from my employer, which at the time was Keystone Resort. And then fast forward to the conversations we had, a lot of it along a similar line, right? People have chosen to live in Summit County and they usually have an attachment to the place that they're living in. And a lot of people tend to think of it as a regional environment where they maybe are buying their groceries in Dillon, work in Breckenridge, and live in Keystone, right? And for them, what they want is the availability of the housing unit that meets their needs. So let's say you're somebody who is going from their late 20s to their early 30s, thinking about having, children. And, your 1-bedroom condo that you're splitting with, your partner and 2 other people maybe don't work for you anymore, and you want to find the next type of housing. So all the conversations that we had with regards to housing tended to be more nuanced around trying to find the housing unit that met people's different lifestyle needs at different times, not necessarily whether or not that housing unit was in Keystone. Sorry if that was a really complicated and long answer.
From your economics background, they're supplemental, right? Like housing in Keystone is kind of a similar product to housing in Breckenridge. It's housing in the county that's important.
And that's generally what I hear. People have places they would prefer to live, but if you're in the deed restriction lottery, whatever you end up getting drawn for is winning the lottery. And people will say like, oh, I'm looking for a place on this side of the county, but I'm willing to consider.
So some balancing of different perspectives in terms of, I kind of broke this out by some bigger categories that appeared more regularly. So short-term rentals throws a little bit of a dichotomy here in terms of full-timers see them as, having more negative impact on the community, whereas part-timers tend to see them more as an essential economic support role. Development, full-timers tend to want limits, right? I think for a lot of full-timers, especially people that I've had anecdotal conversations with that have lived here for a long time, it's very important for them to see that sense of access to nature and not necessarily feeling like this is the most built-up place in the world. Whereas part-timers tend to be more open to growth as long as there's a more diverse enhancement of amenities that come alongside it, right? Some of the part-timers tend to be more interested in seeing things like more activities to do in Keystone. And I think you can probably isolate some of that back to, is that necessarily their own influence that they're trying to represent, or is it from their short-term rental perspective? You can parse some of that out. Tourism balance, full-timers tend to feel more overwhelmed, especially during peak times, whereas part-timers tend to want more activation year-round. Vail Resorts relationship, full-timers tend to feel like there's this sense that Vail Resorts is, kind of having this outsized influence in the town, whereas part-timers seem less critical of Vail Resorts, though in the parentheses here, there is tension currently between part-timers and K and C within the Vail Resorts PUD, which I think you all probably know better than I do. And priority focus, full-timers tend to prioritize community building and resident services, whereas part-timers tend to prioritize visitor experience and property value. How does that resonate with you all?
Any surprises?
So if you're looking at the last bullet and you were trying to figure out how do you move forward, just looking at the last bullet, what is the overlap where that would help us prioritize? Because some of that is just a different way of looking at the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
The visitor experience and resident services could be an overlap, but I'm guessing, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you could probably say that there's definitely services that could meet both of those needs, right? And maybe more diverse grocery options, more childcare service options. But my personal opinion is I could probably go on with a long list of different types of services that could try and thread that balance, or that could try and, maybe favor one side of the scale over the other. But I do think that there's a little bit of a policy question in there too of, how do you want to, what way do you want to steer influence in terms of putting a thumb on the scale?
Okay, fair.
Yeah.
One thing that shocked me a little bit was the part-timers want more activations, and it's by calling out part-timers there, it almost indicates full-timers don't want more activation. And that's shocking to me because I think we've talked a little bit about like that shoulder season shortening and maybe ways to drive events throughout the year. And it seems like the data is almost against that from.
I would think that's correct.
You think that's?
Or you could look at it the other direction in that if there was more balanced tourism that would keep restaurants open, that would be something that the full-timers are looking for.
I mean, having roommates that work in the village, I mean, they talk about the village in Snake River Saloon, right? They talk about how dead it is in October. And that's dead is a negative thing. So that's just and maybe that's just my group, but like, that's the shocking thing for me is that it always seemed like to me that we had wanted more of a minimal shoulder season, or the desire was that. And then, yes, full-timers are overwhelmed during this peak period, but typically my understanding had been that we had all wanted like more little things, not like we don't want President's Day weekend every weekend, but like not being so dead. But and maybe the data is showing against.
I think that my sense is just mostly from the conversations I've had with full-time residents is that there is a desire to see more activation, but more activation that is maybe more community minded, and also breathing more life into the community kind of year round. So things like activating Lakeside Village, things like, seeing restaurants that are open year round. And I think, kind of creating more options for them to, exist within their community more regularly. Whereas I think activation probably from the part-time perspective, and this is a really good point. I'm actually glad you brought this up because I think it highlights how sometimes when you oversimplify a sentence in a bullet point, it can sometimes lose some nuance. I think the part-time perspective around activation is a little bit more like, think about some of the festivals that go on in, River Run Village, or, maybe events that kind of draw, more seasonal tourism here. So, so some of that kind of activation more peppered throughout the year, I think is a little bit more of what I'm seeing from the part-time residents, whereas more full-time residents tend to think about it more like on a more pragmatic and smaller scale, like just seeing more restaurants open year round, just seeing more economic vitality and some key.
That's what I thought. And in reading this, I was like, have I been wrong the whole time?
No, you know what? I think that's a really good point for me to summarize
The
that.
numbers.
Yeah.
That's what I came up with, is that full-timers and even part-timers wanted broader, longer season. The full-timers really don't like the peaks.
Yeah.
All right, and we understand that. The part-timers have a financial interest in having peaks, but they certainly all were interested in spreading out and having things open. And the only way you can have things open is to have something to draw people.
So creating a steady state as
More
opposed to
in the-
just the surges.
Yeah, you know, expanding the shoulders. And the other thing I was a little surprised about is both groups identified the Lakeside Village problem.
Mhm.
And when you looked at the numbers that fit, when you got dug in and looked at the actual numbers, that's kind of what I took away. They weren't quite as strong, but they all recognized by clear majorities.
I noted that as well, Mayor. And I wondered if some of that was, I think, were there not multiple choices on some of the survey questions? And that was one of the options. There is
Yeah.
a certain degree to which any survey is going to lead you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll ask, because I'm open to this, if you think that that's true. Do you think that we led people a little bit?
I don't know, I'm asking you. If we had said, what should we work on? Do you think Lakeside Village?
See, I do think they got led that way.
I agree as well.
Yeah, and I don't think it was, like, I think
Not a bad thing, we just
started
recognize
from
Yeah,
the conversations we had here, where Lakeside Village revitalization was this big thing. And I think it's important, but there needs to be more context to that, right? Like, if we just put $1 billion in Lakeside Village, doesn't automatically make Lakeside Village a focus point, right? Does it need to be connected to the resort? Is there other infrastructure? Like, so it's like, it's more of a wholesome approach.
I think you said.
I
I
think,
don't consider it a criticism of the survey. I consider it a nuance that we need to be aware of.
I will say, I do agree. I think that some of the influence to include some specificity around Lakeside Village came from the conversations that were had here, as well as with your Planning and Zoning Commission. But also, one thing I'll also remind folks is that when the survey was started, we had already also had 2 open houses at that point too. So there was a little bit of conversation
Yeah.
that was had with other folks and stakeholders and members of the public that, so I do think that there was a sense that we put a little bit of a thumb on the scale by talking about Lakeside Village, but I will also just say that I personally don't think it came out of nowhere. So
I think what partially happened was, if you recall, the RTAP process kind of set the stage a little bit with regards to that. They kind of gained a little bit of momentum as a result of that to where we are today.
I think we're all saying the same thing.
Yeah.
It's maybe a little bit of thumb. It is important, but we just need to keep that
Yeah.
understanding.
I think the nuance, and I appreciate you parsing it out, is where the part-time residents are interested in the drivers that may be capable, as the mayor points out, of creating the effects that some of the full-time folks are looking to see. Do we need to drive a rounder set of visitation? Because that can drive the open community and services that are needed for more year-round services. And we continue to be befuddled by some things. Like you said, you can throw things at Lakeside, like, that place over there is such a wonderful thing, the conference center. And we had MSAC this weekend, and we had the fire chiefs conference last weekend that drives a whole lot of visitation to the community for over 20 years. And yet we don't see the vibrance right across the street from it. And that'll be a challenge for us.
Yeah. And when you're talking about vibrance, you're not going to have, we can throw all the money we want into Lakeside Village until you address who's going to buy the services. That doesn't accomplish a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it has to go together as you look at it. And that's where I think that's where part of the overlap occurs. To have more restaurants open in Lakeside Village like you had in the 80s, you got to have traffic. If you don't have traffic, the restaurants aren't going to come.
Right.
And
Chicken and egg.
And it's a challenge because like I've been to several events that take place at Riverwalk Center that have outgrown Riverwalk Center, and where can they go? They could go here. And when I talk to the organizers, well, why not? And they say, well, where are they going to have lunch?
and that's a challenge we have working with Vail Resorts. Because Vail Resorts in Lakeside Village has basically, other than a pizza place, everything else that has to do with meals and the lodging is all Vail.
Yeah.
And it's a chicken and an egg issue that's going on.
Unrelated, one of the questions I had was, when you talk about more important values and something, are those prioritized when you have, or are they just listed?
I'm sorry, can you refresh me?
Like, on all of these key takeaways.
Yeah.
You would have 4 or 5 points on each one, 3, 4.
Oh,
I
yeah.
just didn't know it was.
Not priority, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So I just wanted to kind of, this is something I think that I'm realizing I wish we'd sort of talked about maybe a little earlier in the process. So this is just another way I'm thinking about kind of how do we take what we found and what we heard through the engagement process, and, you know, where does that land in terms of informing the plan? So this is what we call a spectrum of engagement. And, you know, in planning school, you get this sort of beat into your head, and I was just reminded of this, and I think it's good to kind of bring this here. So apologies, but I'm just going to read this out loud to you. So
Quick question.
yeah,
Who is you in that? Is that community or the council? You use
Sorry.
the word you over and over in that chart.
we'll keep, oh, that would be the community.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, so the top line is the engagement goal, and then the bottom line is the promise to the engaged participants. And so the first on the left is inform. And so inform is providing the public or stakeholders with balanced and objective information to assist them in understanding issues and outcomes. And the promise that you would give to those engaged participants is, we'll keep you informed. Consult is to obtain feedback on analysis, options, and/or decisions from experts and decision makers. And so basically to give the public an opportunity to provide their feedback on analysis, on options, on decisions that were provided to them by decision makers or other experts. And then the promise to the engaged participants would be, we will keep you informed, listen and acknowledge your concerns and aspirations, and we will provide feedback on how your input influenced our decisions. Going along, so in collaborate, the engagement goal would be involve members of the public or stakeholders at key milestones and incorporate their recommendations into the planning and development process. The promise to them would be we will look to you for advice in formulating options and incorporate your recommendations into decision policies to the maximum extent possible. And then decide would be empower the public and stakeholders to act as decision makers on key milestones of the planning process. And the promise of them would be, we will implement what you decide. And so I'll just pause here and say that under most planning processes at the comprehensive planning level, the way engagement typically kind of falls within this spectrum is usually somewhere around the consult level. So generally what we do is we try to understand their aspirations, their issues, their challenges, give them opportunities to respond to existing conditions, to data, to analysis that's provided to folks, understand their concerns, understand their feedback, and then try to incorporate that feedback into the decision-making process, and then report back to them how their input influenced the decisions. And the reason that that's typically the case is because, for the most part, comprehensive plans are serving people like planning commissions, town staff, and elected officials. And for the most part, we live in a representative democracy. So for the most part, community members are trying to provide their input, trying to provide what are their challenges, and weigh in on the things that are provided to them. And then the expectation then is to hand it back off to the staff, elected officials, and the appointed officials to run with that information, consider it, and then weigh that against other priorities and data and make the best decisions possible. So I just want to see, does that sound right to you?
It sounds right to me, but I think the difference in 99% of the engagements you have is that you have a starting point and people are going to critique the starting point. We have this field of nothing, and we're trying to get the perfect product out of this field of nothing to start with. And a lot of the other companies or towns that you work with might have a comp plan already, and people have seen it, seen how it acts, not liked a portion of it, and are giving feedback on that plan that exists versus us, we're creating it from scratch.
Well, one thing I'll say,
You.
I've never worked with a community that every community member, every elected official liked every single thing that was in their comprehensive plan.
Lindsay said he was getting a unanimous vote on everything, so.
That's fine.
Sorry, go ahead.
So this is a perfectly legitimate idea. What I would ask you is, how are we doing? And by we, I mean the SE group and the council and the planning commission.
Well, I think just fine.
Are we following this?
I think so. I think we've asked the community what their input is, what their challenges are, what do they struggle with, what are their priorities, what is their vision for the community. We've gone back to them with various data points and various analysis that we've done as a consultant team and this town staff and asked them to weigh in on it. And I think now we're at the phase where the next stage would be to say that, we've taken the results of the engagement that we've gotten thus far. And it'll be on us to use that to help inform recommendations in the plan. And then ultimately let you all as decision makers for the community.
And does
Make
the
decisions based on it.
draft comprehensive plan, is that shared with the community before we make decisions?
Oh, yeah, it will be a
Okay.
public
Yeah,
record.
public comment.
Because that's the part that I'm
Yeah.
missing.
Yeah, so
Okay,
we'll make
perfect.
sure that that's out for public comment.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
good model.
So
Useful.
kind of building off of that, then how does that go into the plan? So there's sort of these, I think Gabby mentioned this during our last call, but I just wanted to kind of illustrate this graphically. So we have kind of a few things. We have, what is the data telling us, right? Demographic, housing, environment, transportation, a lot of Brian's world. And what is the community telling us, the issues, the challenges, perspectives, desires? And we use that to understand what are the trends and challenges, opportunities for this plan to address, right? What is the lived experience? And then what is the data telling us? And then kind of form that all into plan recommendations. So policy and programmatic recommendations that can be used to address the trends and challenges. They're informed by data and the community input.
So we had to get to this point in order for us to develop a draft plan for you. And that's assuming we were pretty satisfied, like we were with the housing needs assessment, excuse me, and the information gathering. We are going to move forward with exactly that. We're going to show you recommendations in a plan that are based upon what we've heard. So I did not want to get the cart before the horse, but I'm fairly convinced that we are ready to show you a draft plan. Now, will we all agree? No. But I will be very, very surprised if you hear recommendations that you're going to go, where did you get that? I don't think that will happen. So I hope to go to P&Z very soon, actually November, to introduce the plan to them and then on to council.
Sorry, I'm going to go back to Lindsay's point. Part of our responsibility in the plan is to, our promise to our engaged participants, that being the community and the stakeholders that chose to weigh in on this planning process, is informing them throughout the plan of how their input influenced the recommendations that we got to.
And so does that, we are obviously a very heavily tourist-driven economy, right? Like that's something all 7 of us can agree on probably. When we're drafting this plan, will there be call-outs that, X recommendation is due to the second homeowners comments or due to the fact that we are a tourist market, or like, how do we see the great work that you've done in breaking off these survey results in the actual plan?
Here's a way that we've typically done it in terms of formatting. So, and we haven't done this with every plan we've ever worked on, but it's something we have done. And I'd say probably more commonly we've done this. is as an appendix to the plan, we can have the full engagement report, right? And obviously making sure that it's in compliance with the accessibility laws. But having that as a reference document so that anybody who's reading the plan, they can reference that appendix and know that they can find all of the information that was provided during public engagement. So that's one piece. And then the second piece, during the recommendations, sometimes we might use icons to delineate, this was informed by data, this was informed by public input, things like that. So, it's maybe a bit of a higher level in terms of where that shows up in terms of the recommendations of the plan, but it might be, this recommendation is informed by data trends and public engagement. A lot of the times, the way that it kind of goes in terms of the chapters would be that the recommendations are kind of at the end, but the lead up to that is describing, how did we get here, right? Here's the information that was synthesized, here's the data that was looked at, here's what people were describing in their engagement, here's the analysis of how that kind of fits into this broader context. And this might be with regards to housing. This might be with regards to transportation challenges that people described throughout the engagement process, or that we uncovered through our analysis of looking at, your existing transportation system. And then, so that's kind of the buildup. And then comes the recommendations. And then again, just to continue that sort of tying it back to the initial narrative that led up to the recommendations, we could use icons to delineate how that was informed.
I think personally, and what I see is like the three large stakeholder groups, full-time residents, part-time residents, and like Vail Resorts affiliated folk. And it might be good to do those icons, because I think for me personally, if I was to read this recommendations area, I'd want to know why there's such a focus on STR issues in town, right? And where did that get informed from? And I know, because how I was thinking, it was could we do two different comp plans, one for part-time, one for full-time? And I'm not suggesting we do that, but I think it's important to somewhat break those out, so when people are reading this, they can see that there was thought put into both groups and not just the tourist.
This is your plan that you have to live with. So ultimately, I will take direction from you all in terms of how you want it structured. But as an outside perspective, something that I might suggest is that by describing things in terms of how you get to recommendations by whether or not that person is a part-time person or a Vail Resorts influence person, it might not necessarily resonate with members of the community in terms of being positively received. You might be sending a signal that you're favoring one voice over another. And whether or not you are, that's not for me to decide.
At the end of the day, the voice that matters is our constituents.
Right.
And to include all those.
Which is all of them, which is every single one.
Every single person in this community is a constituent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a question on process. I see 4 different plans there. What's shared with the community and when?
So to Lindsay's point, assuming that you all are comfortable with the way we broke out the engagement and using that full engagement report as our basis for understanding how we want to rely on that to inform recommendations, then we can go into drafting mode and get a full first draft of the plan together, have that presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission on the 20th. And then from there, I think what I would recommend, and I haven't talked to Lindsay about this, but listening to this conversation, what I would recommend is that we take a pause and incorporate the feedback we get from the P&Z as quickly as possible within maybe 1 working week or 2. And then from there, put it out to the public to comment. And from them to be able to weigh in, we leave that open for a specific amount of time that we can maybe determine together either today, or I can come up with some recommendations and come back to you. But once we've closed the public comment period, we can take in those recommendations, highlight what the members of the community responded to, and then come back to you and present that.
That's when it comes back to us.
It's a great circle back.
And it's a wise approach. We don't want to make decisions before the community has had its chance.
Right.
And
I didn't know if you were going to go between each one and goes to the community, which I thought messy.
so my,
That would be really hard.
that would be
This is the
painful.
building on one after another.
So P&Z has been absolutely wonderful, asking the right questions, incredibly efficient, garnering information. I don't know if is going to be a one meeting deal with them yet. But we're absolutely going to utilize P and Z for a platform to get the word out.
Will everyone who submitted the survey be emailed the comp plan? Like, and be like, hey, it's open for public comment. Let us know what we did good or.
Would be good.
And will it only go to the people whose emails you've collected?
Well, we can certainly send it out to all the people that, whose emails we've collected. We can also post it on the comp plan website. We can have it posted on the Town of Keystone website. We can use social media. We can put out flyers. We can try and get out the word as fast as possible, and we can use the town's newsletter email list. But we can't send it out to emails that we have.
No, if we post it on a general collective site
Sure.
and then send
Yeah.
the emails
Yeah,
to say, here's the link.
yes,
You participated.
yeah,
We want you to see this.
right.
We would do that.
That's reasonable, right?
This is.
I would not want to rely simply on,
This
the
is a
town
really
emails.
weird quirk, but I think that what we should do is host the comprehensive plan for public review on the comp plan website that we created, because then the remediation of the comp plan through accessibility laws, we've just adopted 2 comp plans in the last 2 months, and it takes quite a long time to get through that process. If we host it on our website, we're not beholden to the same scrutiny as if we posted on your website. So that's a really weird quirk, but it's something I recommend because it could save us about.
So you're proposing a presence on our website that would link to yours?
Well, that's kind of a legal issue.
Yeah.
So,
No.
Yeah, and Jennifer, you might know better than me on this, but
If it's on your website, I'm for other reasons, I'm not frankly worried about that
okay.
all that much for now.
I mean, in the end, it ends up on our site, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But then you
It would
also
ultimately, yeah.
once at the end.
And so the final version of the plan will be very pretty, laid out, in a nice graphic document. And we have in-house graphic designers that are up to date on the Colorado accessibility law, so it'll be in that final format. But in terms of a draft, that's
reasonable. You don't need
it's
to go
gonna,
that far
yeah,
with
it's a cumbersome process. I can assure you.
good point.
Sounds wise.
This is just recent lived experience that I'm trying to carry forward.
Those cars will fade.
Lindsay, do you have
And I appreciate
from us?
No, I'm very, very happy with how tonight went. I think we have a good enough foundation on which to build the plan upon. So we're going to move forward unless we hear otherwise, but I think we're ready.
Good job.
But I just want to say, I really appreciate that during the last conversation we had, that you all challenged us to separate this feedback out. I really think that it was more valuable to the process. And I think that's part of the reason we have these regular check-ins and cadences throughout the plan, is that, we can sometimes get stuck in our ways in the way that we're working. So for you all to push us to make the project better, that's great.
I like the way what you sent us. Thanks.
Thank you. I've got a question for the town manager, since it's now 6 o'clock. As I'm looking at the rest of the items on the agenda, some of these, I would propose that the discussion of the skid steer purchase can be handled during the resolution portion. Have that discussion.
Actually, I was going to say, there are basically 3 corporations that can provide a workable skid steer for us: John Deere, Bobcat, and Caterpillar. And we're still working with Caterpillar. There were some inconsistencies with their bid. So I think we can take those off the agenda in the workshop and the evening session until we get that. We want to make the right choice here.
Are you concerned that with snow on the ground, we're not going to have time?
No, not at all. Yeah.
Okay, then.
I think you do want to get into the election policy. If it's all right with the council, all of us have the financial report that was provided. If you have individual questions, I think you can address them straight to Heike and get those, and John, and get those answered. I would propose that we defer that particular item. I think it's very important for us to get into budget items. for a work session. So what I'm basically proposing is we have a brief discussion of election policy so that they can get direction, because there's a timing issue here on that. And then we take a recess, gather food, then come back after food and go through the budget items. Is that satisfactory?
Mhm.
All right, so then going back, John, go ahead and introduce the election issue.
Okay, and I will let our super clerk, Madeline Ciulu, lead this.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Town Council. My name is Madeline Cielu. I'm the town clerk. As you all know, we've got an upcoming municipal election in April of 2026. There is the possibility that the same number of candidates may run for office as the number of offices available. And if that were to happen, the town council may have the opportunity to cancel the election. But in order to do so, we would need to adopt an ordinance prior to this period outlining the requirements for write-in candidates to officially declare their candidacy by a certain date. And passage of that ordinance would only allow for the potential to cancel the election. It wouldn't certify or make it that we had to cancel the election in April if we only had the same number of candidates. So staff is just looking for direction about whether or not this is something you're interested in having, the possibility of canceling the April
What
election.
do other towns do in Summit County?
So I know Breckenridge and Dillon both have these possibilities.
I believe Frisco does as well, because I think they exercised that this last fall.
Yes.
Silverthorne?
I'm not positive on Silverthorne.
Didn't in our charter, we allow for this, but we just didn't allow for, or the understanding of the write-in candidate piece. Is that the only issue?
My reading of the charter is there's nothing that prohibits this. And we use Title 31, and Title 31 in statute does require adoption of an ordinance specifically for the write-in candidates.
And my last question was, if we were to cancel the election, the challenge, of course, we have is who gets, will everybody have a 4-year?
No.
So, I mean, who gets the 2 and who gets the 4 if we cancel the election?
I mean, that's something for you to think about at the time that you have that option. I don't know how other communities do that, but it's something to consider.
And could I ask I would like to see a draft ordinance if we could, for consideration, but I'd like to get that last question that was just asked answered. How do other towns handle, if they have just the exact number, the fact that you have various seats that may have differing terms? That.
I'm familiar with Breckenridge's process because I previously worked there, but they do a random drawing to select that.
Well, the follow-up question on that, we have a very unique situation where we're going to have a significant number again that could be going up for varying levels of term limits. How frequently did the random drawing occur?
In Breckenridge, they have not had to cancel an election in many years. I know in Frisco, I believe they just had only only seats that had the same term lengths. So
You're the mayor, so,
Yeah.
write it up. I mean, I think that's.
Just write it up and then something for us to consider.
Again, this is nice because it doesn't require us to cancel. It just
Right.
puts a tool in our toolbox.
It gives us a tool.
I'm sorry, I certainly agree with your proposal, but I'm kind of trying to figure this out. So we would make that decision to not hold an election on the candidacy declaration date or around about, right? January 26th?
no, it would be no sooner than 64 days prior to the election, which is February 2nd.
Okay, so it would be after the candidate. So I don't understand where the write-in. Normally, a write-in candidate would be somebody who whose name is written in during the election. So what would be the rule for?
They would have
Say you
to,
cannot be write-ins, or you must meet
if you're a write-in, you would have to declare your candidacy. The ordinance,
different at some date after the decision was made to.
it would be after the 71-day period and prior to the 64-day period.
Okay, so when we might make the decision to forego the election, we would know all
Yes.
the candidates.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I would like to see that.
I think you have your guidance. And with that, I would like to propose a 20-minute recess for dinner and bring your food back here. And then at 6:25, we'll turn it over to the town manager and the finance director to talk about the supplemental budget discussion, and then
said, there's just been some tweaks and stuff like that. So this is our 25 is our first full year of operations. So as many of you are aware, we've learned a lot through this process. So so this kind of just puts everything together and solidifies it. We are going to do a supplemental budget, which will increase our appropriations that we have to do by law. The biggest one when it comes to the 25 is just accounting for that transfer out of the general fund into the lodging tax fund, which is where we have suggested that all of the police budget comes out of. And that's just to make everything more transparent instead of splitting it up in between two funds. At the end of the day, the appropriations for the 25 supplemental budget, we do not anticipate hitting that mark. We fully believe that we will be under those expenditures. But we only have until December 15th to send that to the state or get approved by you guys so we can be able to send that to the state. So we kind of have to be prepared for it. So good news when it comes to, and I'll just highlight, like if you guys want to just open the budget summary, I will go high level on the general fund first, and then I'll let you guys answer questions. Does that sound fair? Okay, perfect. So at a high level, if you look at the summary page, you'll see our 24 budget. You'll see the 24 actuals, and then you'll see the first approved budget. And then we did do a supplemental budget at the beginning of the year for the housing fund. So for the general fund, those didn't change. And then our proposed supplemental budget for this year. So it's important to note that if you look at the general fund beginning balance, when the approved budget was done, the anticipation was the fund balance would start at 1.1. But it actually started, we ended the year 24 with 1.9 for a fund balance. So we started off better than what we anticipated. Revenues, of course, have increased for 25 estimates, and that's mostly contributed just because some of our 24 revenues we didn't get in 25 until after our year end closed. So then the next discussion is the 26 budget. You'll see those revenues go back down just to realize which will actually come in 26. So for expenditures, if you look there, they're actually under what we had approved for the 25, but that's due to us moving that lodging tax transfer. So at the end of all of that, the 25 budget was approved with a general fund ending balance of 2.1. And then our estimate for the end of 25 is actually going to be at 3 million. So we've actually improved our financials, which is good. And then this, and then you'll see in there the 35% restricted for reserves that council approved on a couple months ago. So that's the high level of the general fund. So I'll just open it up for questions that you guys might have on the general fund.
No question. Okay. Move
All
on.
right, awesome. All right, so then the next one that we'll talk about is the the lodging tax fund. And so that one, we will also do a supplemental budget to account for moving the police service into there. So you'll see that it was approved with the revenues are just about the same, just a little under for our estimate. And then you'll see the transfer from the general fund. You'll see the expenditures on there have greatly increased. And the two reasons for that, we did the Highway 6 safety, and then we also redid one of the roads, Ranch Road. So that's why it's at 1.2. And then, or actually that's the 921 that you see in the capital outlay. And the expenditures at 1.2 is because of the police department, our contribution to the Dillon Keystone Police Department. So at the end, our estimate at the end, the 25, we estimated 437,000 would be our fund balance. And we're estimating for 25, it's actually going to be only 226,000, but we accomplished a lot with the capital improvements. So any questions on those?
Well, that's obviously a decrease. Do you feel that's sustainable for the long term in the next couple of years?
If I can answer that, we're still running a surplus. Thank you. A surplus. So,
Yeah, and
Yeah.
just keep in mind, like, you know, we budgeted 730,000 for the capital improvements, and we ended up spending 921. So that kind of accounts for the difference between what was originally budgeted and what we're ending up with the supplemental budget. So it all makes sense. And when it comes to the lodging tax fund, it is, you know, majority of it is for capital improvements and then public safety. So the amount of money that we put in there is the amount of money with our balance that we can spend on those capital improvements.
So is it better in the long run to keep, to build that lodging tax fund to enable major infrastructure projects like the sidewalk we've been talking about, or to keep more flexibility in the general fund?
it's much better to keep it in the general fund because you can transfer from the general fund and use the general fund for these types of expenditures. And actually, I would like to build a surplus in the lodging tax, but not this coming year either, because we still have some minor, I say minor, but they're expensive projects that we absolutely need to get done, like the Razor Drive sidewalk to the bus stop.
Well, that's what I'm thinking of, because, you know, if we look at the Dillon project, and this is relevant, it's just a question of where the policing money is going to come from. That's why I bring this up. And we voted last year to break it in half. I'm glad the auditor said it should be under a single. I think it's much clearer and doesn't look like a sleight of hand by breaking it up. So that's a positive thing. But every penny we take out of lodging for policing is a penny that's not available for what's going to be a really pricey project over there. Do you think it's, what is that? Do you think it's even feasible to start that sidewalk project at Razor Drive coming year?
I disagree with your premise here, that every penny we take out of lodging for police, because that police has to be paid from somewhere. And if we're not paying for it out of lodging, we'd be paying out of general fund.
Right.
However, general fund can be used for infrastructure, and we do use
Which is
it.
getting me
for
to the point.
infrastructure
Do you
projects.
anticipate next year that we might be taking money from the general fund to have enough money in the infrastructure fund to actually make that first set of sidewalks north of US 6?
I feel that we have enough money in the lodging tax fund to do the three projects high priority projects I've identified: the sidewalk, the north intersection at Tennis Club Road and Highway 6.
Okay,
Where
where the
it's
drainage has all gone wrong,
Yep.
right?
and
What's the third one?
and then a mill and overlay of West Keystone Road.
Because that's deteriorating, is that
Yeah.
how that,
Yeah,
was that called out by the road assessment?
it's identified in there as one of our priority roads, and it's there are roads that are worse than that, but they're not
As heavily.
as heavily trafficked.
I suggest
Yeah, I know
we
that's all.
focus on the supplemental budget, not next.
Well, I bring it up because it's relevant as to where that money shows up. So I appreciate the discussion.
Continue.
All right. All right. And when it comes to the housing fund or the CTF fund, we are not doing a supplemental budget for that because we will not be exceeding our appropriations that were made in the first place. So those are actually going to be less than what we had appropriated for expenditures,
But also less revenues.
but also revenues, yes. Yeah. Yeah, and when it comes to the revenues, well, the CTF fund is really nothing to talk about that because we're not receiving revenues until 26. But the housing fund, it gave us this year more sort of realistic look at how those can kind of fluctuate with what people purchase in town. And since the housing fund, the housing fund taxes don't apply to like household utilities or groceries.
Could you say that again a different way? So you're saying
I
this
can't.
number is not the same as, it's not based on the same fundamental sales tax number because
It's not, we don't get, so the housing fund, the 5A and the 6B taxes are exempt from like residential utilities and most household foods that you purchase.
But at a hotel, you're paying into that. And so that
Yes.
maybe because the entire county suffered a little bit of a downturn in bookings the past year, we're seeing the volatility of the revenue that can be generated from that.
You didn't necessarily see that in Keystone.
so, but that begs the question, is this, you ask your question.
Yeah,
There's a $300,000 difference then.
Yeah, there is. And I mean, some of it, I feel like when I look at those in the difference is people are buying more necessities like food rather than going to the real retail shops and buying those kind of products. So the focus of where they're spending their dollars is a little bit different.
So the $300,000 in revenue that we're missing is because people didn't buy as much stuff in our shops.
Yeah, or they went.
No. Because I did not use the correct numbers when I set the original budget
Oh, okay.
is the real reason for the $300,000
Okay.
difference, because
That makes more sense to me. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to understand where this.
And related to my colleague's question, this is a proportional, this is Keystone's proportion of tax, okay.
It is, yep.
Which is why he was concerned why it would go down, okay.
It's not really proportion, it's based on the actual sales of Keystone. So it isn't like.
As opposed to, it's not a fifth of all the money.
It's divvied up by the town. based on.
Right, it's based on our sales that happen in Keystone.
A big hunk of it was this January mistake I made that we saw in the general fund too.
Keeping you anyway.
Good. Oh, you gave it away.
But yeah, so I mean, at the end of the day, basically, I mean, if you factor in about $1 million in revenue for the housing fund each year, should be consistent unless something changes in the economy drastically. So that's all I have for the supplemental budget, unless you guys have questions or need more clarity.
Any questions? Carol?
Very quick question. I'm looking at the grant money. What was the program by which we did the mitigation wildfire mitigation out here? We spent 10K. Did the state?
Oh, it was the county.
Oh, the county.
Yeah.
So there was no transfer into us. There was no grant money that came to us. They just spent it.
I am not sure, to tell the truth, and I let Lindsay go home.
The way
I
that
don't
grant
see it,
works,
that's why.
the way the grant works is and they, as of last week, they had not paid out the grants yet. But the way the grant works is you spend the money, then they reimburse you the 50%. And the county, as of last week, had not paid out, at least from my homeowners association, had not paid out their match.
Do we need to reflect that in here?
No, you don't. You only, budgets actually only need to reflect
The expenditures.
the expenditures legally.
Although there's several notes that say we have to recognize the Colorado grant money.
Well, we don't have to. It's a very good
Do it so that
practice.
we can
Yeah,
understand. Okay.
yeah.
I think it is a good fact.
Yeah, so on that one, we have to recognize the full expenditure.
Right.
So the way that the budget was approved on those Colorado grant monies is you guys just netted it.
Okay.
And so that's why the appropriations have increased for that. But this is a good conversation because it's good for me to know that we're expecting some grant money for that.
So are we getting like 50% of what we did? Is that what it's going to be? Okay.
We had a requirement to submit our receipts to the Strong Futures guys at the county. They receive them, and then they will direct that we get reimbursed, and I'm sure that reimbursement then ends up being approved as part of the BOCC's.
Supplemental.
But not really supplemental, it's part of their approval of expenditures.
Okay.
Any other questions?
And I might be reading this wrong. Page 5 of the supplemental budget says draft at the top. Oh, of course, I just lost it. It says draft, and it was a big number about smoking cessation, 240 and change. Could you highlight that? It could, because the one that was in there originally was 27,000, I think. So that's a fairly large delta. Can you explain that a little bit?
I can explain this. A lot of the money is directly taken out from our nicotine tax funds to pay for the cessation policies. This year, early childhood options and the various health-related funds that this money goes to do because of the ballot language. I just budgeted the money we would actually see above and beyond the expenditures. I didn't budget these expenditures because they didn't really pass through our hands. I should have budgeted the expenditures. Basically, the number we'll see in the end is at around $27,000, but we had to.
So we will see a profit of $2,700 or $27,000, or are we going to see a loss and a spend of $240,000?
No, we're bringing in more than we're spending for these policies.
And is there any possibility with changing laws? I mean, what we did here with reducing the, what the heck is it called? Flavored tobacco products, is there ever a possibility where we think we're gonna go into the negative there and start owing money into all these programs based on the IGA language?
No, we don't. No.
Okay, that's simple for me. Thank you.
Or you don't anticipate?
No, there is no way. There is no way unless you as a board choose to make donations out of the general fund to some of these organizations and programs outside of the entire nicotine IGA.
Thank you.
And we just signed a new IGA, right? Or there's a new one?
We just signed the old one.
Oh,
The
okay.
new one will be coming.
So is the new one going to be that the money will just go directly to that fund and not pass through us, or will?
It will still have to be budgeted the same way.
Okay,
But the anticipation of the new one, given the way we're going to do it, because of federal cuts and pressures on these nonprofits, is 40% of the nicotine funds of all the parties to the IGA will go to cessation programs, and the remaining 60% will go to a fund set up underneath the Summit Foundation to make distributions to these companies. And we have a set number that is budgeted for next year in the IGA. If the money is above that, if the tax income is above that, the communities will get,
it will come back to us.
the extra will come. If it's below that, that money just comes out of the Summit Foundation
Okay,
funds.
is this that new fund that Summit Foundation is putting together?
Yes, yes. And that way we don't have the organization showing up at each individual council, sometimes double dipping. It will create just a much more informed distribution of funds, because one organization will know all the funds that are coming in and all of them that are going out to any particular entity.
Thanks for that.
Any other questions on the supplemental? And let's proceed to the proposed budget.
All right, so next we'll talk about the 2026 proposed budget. So if we look at it at a high level on the summary sheet, you will see that we will start with the general fund beginning balance, which is estimated from that year-end estimated 2025 at just a little over 3 million. You'll see our revenues are just a little under the 25 estimates. And as I explained before, that is mainly just due to in 25, we received some of 24's revenues. So realistically, if you look at the revenues for the proposed 26, this should be what we should expect generally each year based on revenues, unless something changes or or grants.
And I would like to say we did not in any way anticipate, this budget does not anticipate any additional revenue due to Kindred being open.
Fair.
Since it's not open, I think that that's a good
Conservative.
sort of.
Yeah, well, we figure either way with just keeping our sales tax revenues flat with this year, when Kindred does open, we will see additional sales tax revenues for that, with just not knowing, how sales tax revenues will produce in 26, but it should balance it out. But we'll keep an eye on that each and every month. And then expenditures, we anticipate about 2.9 million in expenditures. For debt service, we've got the 520,000 there, and that's for the anticipated building lease purchase. And then the transfer to the lodging tax fund of 800,000. So I know you guys want to ask questions on the details of that, so we can just jump into that.
Questions?
And I'd like to point out, this does not grant funds that we do have coming or may have coming, our grants will apply for, are not shown in here until we actually get the grant money.
Until we're awarded, and then when they're awarded, then we can do a supplemental budget to account for those expenditures.
I did have one question on the draft general fund budget, and it came in the area of a building permit in your note that said 10% from Summit County on building permit review and grading and excavating permits goes to open space. What's the driver of that?
Well, it's the 18, so you're talking about the 18 grand in, for this year that we got?
Yeah, 18 grand this year, and I assume that exists every.
No, that's from Summit County. So it was a building project that started with them and that got transferred to us. And so they collect that open space fee. And so they, since it's our project now, that's,
And that's Canberra Townhomes.
I understand that.
okay.
It's a silly question, but because the roads are kind of in flux, as to what we're taking responsibility for and all that, does the snow removal services and other road services, what does that really reflect? I was trying to pull them all together and I couldn't.
Yeah,
Figure that out.
founded that.
The maintenance has gone up and I believe snow services went up a bit too.
So you're talking,
Okay,
yeah, you're
yeah.
talking about like line 140
140
snow removal services.
And one.
Yeah, so basically what we did in 25, we budgeted 168. We actually only used, or we we're anticipating only using 120 for 25. But we went ahead and put the 168 in there because it's hard to know.
Well, and because,
Which is really, doing this many roads now, we're gonna be doing this many, I didn't know what was reflected in here.
this, so we're taking on the roads we've identified as town-owned roads that we did not know were town-owned roads. That's Misel, North Fork, Gondola, and,
The ones presented last time, I think.
yeah, there's one other small,
That's reflected now
and that's reflected in the new budget for plowing.
for maintenance and plowing.
Yes, that's why the maintenance budget went up also.
Or did it, or was it stay the same? Okay, yeah, it did go up, yeah. Okay, I was just trying to pull them together with what you had said, what roads.
Yeah.
We're not anticipating another level next year then,
Uh,
road surface.
Not next year, but next year we will be talking about taking on additional roads that at this point are not owned.
And that's not anywhere here, so
That's not reflected in this budget.
we may have a supplemental at some point if we decide to do that.
Yes,
Okay,
but most likely it will just be in the 2027 budget.
okay.
So the comp plan looks like we're adding some money into next year as well. Is that because we're not anticipating being able to finish the project before the end of the year? $15,000 line 158 or 185.
Yes, I thought Heike explained that in her memo somewhere, right?
Yeah, well, that was the proposed estimate that SE Group gave us for the extra work that they'll have to do based on your guys' direction. If
What
Lindsay was,
Which was that?
yeah, if Lindsay was here, he could probably explain that a little bit better. But
I don't
that,
think it was extra work. I think it was lack of performance, but
Well, it went beyond their,
To when we
it
asked,
went beyond the contract, so it was extra work.
we asked them to disaggregate all the responses. Is that what you're referring to, or something else?
I would think that would be part of it, splitting out the responses on the engagement study is going to be part of it.
Right?
It just,
was there a change order for this or?
No.
yeah,
It will be, though. The contract will reflect the expenditure.
Other questions?
I want to make it very clear. Just because an item is in the budget, as we've seen in 2024 and 2025, does not necessarily mean that money's going to be spent. Plans change, ideas change, priorities change as we go throughout the year. So personally, I'm concerned about two issues. One, that we have a better than balanced budget that anticipates any possible expenditure we can come up with. And we've achieved that. And that's really my primary concern. I'm not overly concerned about every single line item as being matching exactly what we'll have spent at the end of the year. If that makes sense. It's always nice to have extra money at the end of the year.
Well, to reiterate that, and John and I run our budget where just because the money is in there and budgeted, if you don't need it, don't spend it, but it's there if you need it. So it's not a use it or lose it kind of.
And you guys
scenario.
determine most of that need.
Mhm. Yeah, basically any expenditure over, is it?
And I've left some of the salary things. I know we've talked about this. Because of the flux, and I'm not exactly sure how it's going to work out losing Lindsay at the end of the year. So I can't be down
I think the
too
answer,
much staff.
talking to Lindsay, it's going to be sometime next year.
Yeah, but the point is, it's an unknown at this point right now with that, so.
Sure.
Can we talk the police expenses? So I see a jump from 1.2 to 1.5. Do we have a budget?
I just received it today, and my thought was that I would send the police budget out to all of you. And over the next several weeks, you could go over it.
Okay.
And direct any questions to me or chief.
Okay.
And then we can further discuss it. If there are still questions and we need discussion, we can have that at the November 11th meeting.
Does that mean you also want to bump the discussion about Dylan's request that we come up with some of the design money for new building?
Yeah, we'll discuss. Well,
Is that in the budget?
It's not. Right now, there's money in the budget. I think it's 12,500 out of us.
Whose budget?
We'll use it out of our budget, we have all these engineering funds, and what we're first going to do is a facility study. We're not going to be designing any buildings, making any plans like that next year.
We're going to discuss that?
Whether we should spend $12,500 to know what we have and what we need. I kind of felt that was in my purview.
Good with that?
Well,
What's the expectation for this project?
To understand
What's there today?
what's there today and what the needs are and how we can meet those needs.
So no commitment beyond that.
There's no commitment beyond that.
When did that request come in?
A couple weeks ago. We've been talking about it from day one, though.
Well, yeah, but we've been talking about how the fact that we weren't
We
yet on board yet.
And I feel as town manager, it's incumbent upon me to make sure you have the information before you make decisions on whether we're on board or not. And the only way to have the correct information is to have it's not a design study for a new facility. That's what we weren't on board with. This is a facilities analysis. This is determining the buildings that the town of Dillon and town of Keystone are going to own, how those can be used, what the actual needs of the police department are and are anticipated to be. This is an important fact-finding thing. I actually do, like I said, this is why I have discretion up to $50,000. I do this on lots of things.
And I don't disagree, it's just that I read about this in the paper.
Yeah, well,
That's not how I want to.
okay,
Information.
so first rule of thumb,
Yeah.
if you read about it in the Summit Daily News and it causes you alarm, they probably got it wrong.
There's quotes from Dylan.
Second rule of thumb is, ask me if something in the paper has caused you distress. Ask me and I can, yeah,
So the details you just gave us are,
yeah,
you made a good point.
yeah.
I think it's no different than what we did with our town road facilities study. And I think that it's important to have. One question I did have, and I know it was explained in the blurb above, but the police vehicle, I know we have budgeted for that previously, not ended up buying police vehicles. And maybe this falls in the have and don't use category. My question is more along the lines of if we expend this $107,000 for a portion of the police vehicle, who owns that vehicle? Where's the liability for it? And then, so we own the vehicle?
The vehicle will be under our capital funds.
So if we,
Yeah.
from the IGA in 10 years, we get that vehicle?
Well, actually, in 3-4 years when it's replaced,
Sure.
we get that
In
vehicle.
2.5 years, we separate from it.
And I would have to ask Chief exactly how the titling and insurance, I know we're good on insurance and liability, but
I'm just concerned that we, if something happens, we're not just we've lost that investment.
no.
I think that's for the IGA,
I'm
isn't
the
it?
IGA, so
Yeah.
all of that stuff's gonna be Title I and John, because we're the insurance holder by the IGA.
Yep.
But the end of lifespan or whatever that looks like, that will be considered your asset. If it dissolves in whatever, then each car that buys, depending on where it comes from, either gets a K or nothing. So it's getting tracked of who's doing it in the future and what that looks like with the tracking.
We won't
Thank
have title, but
Yeah.
we'll have the right to have the vehicle when it's,
Put a plow in the front of it?
heck, put a big 55-gallon tank and we can do fire protection too.
Other questions? Are we ready for the public hearing in 2 weeks? Is that really the next step in the process?
Yeah, that'll be November 11th will be the public hearing, which I won't be here for. So Manager Crone will have to take the lead on that. And then at the December 9th evening meeting is when we'll have the appropriations and all the resolutions for the budget approvals.
The only thing we'll see in advance is the police budget.
Yes. So we can discuss that after the public hearing as part of that same
But just this is the next,
day.
yeah, and so we'll send you questions or.
Yep.
Are we still doing the November 25th meeting? Are we going to talk about that like last year?
Talk about that.
I'll talk about it.
Last year's canceled because of snow.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind canceling another meeting because of snow.
That'd be good for the town. All of us.
Okay. All right. Anything else? In that case, what I'd like to do is adjourn the work session and then we're 10 minutes late, but start the town council meeting, if that's acceptable. In that case, the work session is adjourned.